My guest tonight has been working in journalism for over 40 years, worked as the personal press secretary to Prime Minister Bob Hawke between 1986 and 1991, and now is the host of ABC1's Sunday morning federal politics analysis program, Insiders. Welcome to the show, Barrie Cassidy. Thanks so much for joining me on the program today.
My pleasure.
Now, look, I think it's become a trend that we really need to get someone on the program that knows a bit more about the stuff that we're talking about. So I thank you for coming in and kind of providing some expert opinion.
You did all right early on.
Oh, thank you so much.
You covered most bases. You gave ABC2 a run. You went right to the best source in the country.
Well, okay. Well, you're here on Channel 31, obviously. Given your own style, I think we know about ABC1. You don't need to give too much of a plug. But that's all right. Thanks for coming on the program. I guess looking back 40 years, you've interviewed quite a few different people. You've obviously, I don't know, before we get into kind of a bit of comment about the week, what is there a standout interview for you that kind of, either one that you really got one over on them or they got one over on you?
I did one with Tony Abbott once when we found out only that morning, about an hour before I went to air, that he had made fun of somebody who tried to commit suicide, John Brogden, who was the leader of the Liberal Party in New South Wales. He'd made fun of him at a breakfast. And then about a half an hour before we went to air, we discovered he'd pulled the same stunt at lunch, at a lunch, and we managed to verify the whole thing. And so in a live interview, I was able to put these direct quotes that he had said at the breakfast and the lunch to him on television, live on air. And he was quite shaken by the whole experience. Now, yeah, that was a bit of a moment.
Well, it's funny you should say that, because I just got in some quotes that you said earlier today. I don't have that. It's all right. I'm not going to pull that. Look, let's talk about this. I think asylum seekers...
Maybe later on tonight.
Yeah, maybe you can say some controversial stuff and that can get reported in another interview. Asylum seekers, it's a big issue at the moment. Is it really just a battle between Rudd and Turnbull over who can talk the toughest?
Yeah, absolutely. That's what it is, and that's what politicians do. And what does it say about their judgment of what they think the nature of the Australian public is? They think that we're all xenophobic and the only way to appeal to them is to talk tough. None of them take up the responsibility of putting this whole thing into context. You know, there are 40 million displaced people in the world. Some 4,000 or 5,000 get close to the Australian shoreline every year. I mean, that puts it into context. We don't hear them saying that. They just, they go with the language of what they think, and I just think it's insulting to Australians generally.
I think it's scary when you start seeing Rudd come out, because for so long Labor was opposing Howard, obviously 2001, Children Overboard, and then you've got a Labor government in power, and they're basically using the same rhetoric. It's kind of worrying for me.
Well, it is worrying, and what it does, it just lets all the loopies out of the box. Like today, for example, in the Northern Territory, a Liberal Country Party guy described asylum seekers as scum. He said, why are we sending these demandable homes to the asylum seeker scum? Now, that's what happens when politicians don't take a firm moral stance, when they just appeal to the worst that Australians have to offer and not the best.
It's interesting because Rudd seems to have like the single one line that he's using. He makes no apology for what he's doing.
And who used to say that? John Howard said that consistently. I make no apology, and then he'd go on and put his hard line. And that's precisely what Kevin Rudd's doing now, because it worked for Howard for so long. Yeah,
and what is this hardline and humane approach? Is that even compatible?
Well, in one of the grabs you ran a little earlier, it's not compatible because he was talking precisely about asylum seekers. He said he's going to be hardline and humane towards asylum seekers, when in fact, when he gets his words straight, what he's trying to say is, I'm going to take a hard line towards the people smugglers and a humane approach towards the asylum seekers. Well, try and do the two. It's not easy.
Yeah, well, that's an interesting debate, and something probably people don't realise. Really, I think it's the people smugglers that's the illegal activity. But then you've got these people that are caught up. They're in, say, Sri Lanka, or they're in the middle of a civil war, that sort of thing. A lot of them, we don't necessarily know, but in most cases, genuine refugees. And it's that thing that I guess the public perception don't necessarily realise the distinction.
And what do you call them? You can't really call them genuine refugees until they prove that they are. 90% of them end up proving that they are. So what do you call them? Kevin Rudd calls them illegal immigrants. They're not illegal immigrants. Under international law, anybody fleeing oppression or danger is entitled to seek sanctuary in another country. So they're not illegal. And yet he does that. And so that, again, just creates this kind of negative feeling towards them. And that's precisely what they're trying to do.
Now, can we look at this specific case? 260 Sri Lankans on a boat coming in, and he's called up the Indonesian president, give him a tip-off to... Has this happened before? Is this a new thing?
Well, I know Andrew Bolt today described it as Kevin Rudd's tamper. It's not really that, because the difference here is that they were still in Indonesian waters, but Australian surveillance picked it up. Kevin Rudd had a good enough relationship with the Indonesian president to ring him up and say, look, we've noticed that this boat is in your waters. I think you should haul them back. And he did. So it's It was quite within his right to do that, and I guess it demonstrates that we do have a pretty good relationship with Indonesia, but it shows you just how far, the extent to which Australia is prepared to go so that this becomes their problem and not ours. Interesting though, the media still made it Kevin Rudd's problem. Now all the Australians are reporting, you're now seeing the human face of these people for the first time. Makes a hell of a difference when you actually see these people. Yeah. And the fact that they're speaking with clear English accents now, the Sri Lankan High Commissioner today said, well, they're not Sri Lankans at all.
Yeah. You know? And just very quickly, what do you think Rudd will do with this? Do you think they'll get into Australia? Do you reckon they'll stay in Indonesia or get sent back?
That group won't. That group have got no hope now because they're back in Indonesia and they're being watched every minute. Now, he'll try and limit it as many as he can, and I think eventually he'll change the policy and make it tougher.
Okay, well, Barrie Cassidy, we've run out of time, but thank you so much for joining me on the program today. Cheers, thank you.